I accidentally drank Katie's water, so she's refilling. I'll go ahead and call this May 21st, 2018 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for coming, in particular the Whitefish Girl Scouts. So I'd like to ask the Girl Scouts to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. If you can just stand and begin the pledge for us. Great job. Thank you for that. And I think we'll stay with the Girl Scouts. They have a presentation this evening to the Whitefish Police Department and the Whitefish Fire Department. Thanks again for coming.
For all the things the Whitefish Police Fire Department do for our community.
You can keep them or share them with people in crisis.
Thank you!
Thank you very much.
What do I have to do to get a box of Thin Mints?
We'll move on to item 4, which is communications from the public, and this is time set aside for the public to comment on items that are on the agenda but not advertised for a public hearing. So if you are here for one of our 3 public hearings, please wait for comment until that hearing is called, and then you'll have an opportunity to approach the council. With that said, any public comment tonight? And you can just go ahead and approach the podium, Roger, and just name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Council. Good, nice summer evening. My name is Roger Sherman, and I live at 280 Brimstone Drive, which is in Great Northern Heights. So recently I was appointed to the 93 South Corridor Committee, and we had one meeting last Thursday, which was a very good meeting, and there are some great people on that committee when I'm sitting right here on the council. It looks like the committee should go somewhere, but my request tonight is that we need a budget. $10,000 is not going to do it when you spent $80,000, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, on the Wisconsin corridor, and the Western corridor was quite a bit of money, I think. You have to tell me how much it was. We have $10,000. To do this right, without a superfluous effort, and that's my fear, we need a budget. We need expert traffic consultants to give us advice on these 93 corridors that comes into town for several reasons. One is the traffic flow, as you notice in the morning and evening, is quite significant. The other reason is that the aesthetic value of coming into Whitefish, I take a lot of pride in, and it could be a lot better. And we can do this if we have the correct budget to do it with. So I'm imploring you to increase our budget. 10,000 won't do it. We need to do this right. We need to do it with expert consultation, not with, I'm sure there's some very expert people on the committee, excluding myself maybe, but so let's do this right, and let's do the budget to make it done right, or it's just going to be a superfluous effort. So that's my plea. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Cheryl Watkins, 143 Old Morris Trail, Whitefish. I'm just following up with Roger because I feel like the 93-quarter plan is a huge thing. And I have no written spiel here, so I don't know what I'm really saying. But when you look at the Wisconsin plan, you approved all that before the plan was finished. You've got how many projects out on 93 now? No plan. At some point, I've lived here since '78. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. You're letting all these developments go in. You ain't got a clue. Nobody's got a clue. And it's within your power to just say, we need to stop here for a minute. Just stop. Why can't everybody just stop and take a deep breath and say, we need a 6-month wait on all this stuff. Developers are out for money. Us who live here are just out for maintaining some level of the craziness that goes on out there in traffic. All you have to do is say stop. It's pretty simple, but I don't know the rules, so whatever. Thanks.
Thanks, Cheryl. Who's next? Mary.
Good evening, Mary Flowers, P.O. Box 3094, Kalispell. I want to start by just acknowledging for all the others who, like myself, think that we understand a lot about the city, but don't. I attended a meeting this week during the day, and when I went back out to the parking garage to get in my car, I had a ticket. And I did not realize that when attending a meeting in the middle of the day that you can't park on the upper levels of the parking garage. I have now been advised of that, but just so someone else who I would think like myself would know such things doesn't get caught with a ticket, I thought I would raise that here. Secondly, I would like to echo the comments that you've just heard. I did attend on that fateful day of getting the ticket, the strategic, the highway corridor planning meeting, and I think you have a good core of people to work on that committee, but I was really surprised to hear from the planning director that only $10,000 has been allocated for that effort at this point, and that's being allocated to a traffic engineer to provide essentially some traffic counts and technical information. I know that when you reached out to the county to work with you, you talked much more in the terms of $80,000, and I think it's really critical. I think you have staff that can help to pull together the writing of the plan, but I think for the community at large to really understand the opportunities that we have to really make this a high-quality corridor plan, we need to have that expertise to be able to bring that in, do some charrettes with the community, and really get buy-in into the kind of corridor we want to have. I still have to say that the work that Bruce Booty and others in the community did to ensure that we have the landscaping and the sidewalks that we do now in that corridor was just pivotal at that time. But without that kind of expertise, I don't think you would have been able to move forward with even that kind of landscaping. So I really implore you. I understand that Tuesday night, the 29th, is the first opportunity we have to really look at the budget. So I haven't looked at it. I don't know what you have in it. But I wanted to make it really clear that I hope that becomes a priority. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Who's next?
Good evening. I'm Andy Bestwick. I live at 28 Willowbrook Close. And I want to talk today about the budget for the Parks Department, and specifically the fact that I feel maintenance doesn't get enough money and development and acquisition gets the breadth of the funds. I've brought a couple people with me today from different affiliations and organizations to talk about how that lack of maintenance has affected their programs. And I'm also speaking on behalf of Andy Hergesheimer, who runs the Adult Softball League. So specifically, I'm talking about the sports fields. So Grouse Mountain Soccer Field, the softball fields at the Armory, and the Smith Fields near the hospital. First, the Smith Fields don't see any money from the city, which I understand is an agreement that they have. But I'd like to start working towards getting a little more money for maintenance out there. Next is Grouse Mountain Soccer Fields. Those fields are in a poor state right now. They're unplayable almost, and actually I would consider a public health hazard. There's ridges, it's hard, there's bumps everywhere. It's to the point where it's not looking good. Softball fields are the same thing. Infields are like concrete. The ball bounces all over the place. People are getting smacked in the face. The outfields are lumpy. People are rolling ankles. It's not in a good state. And like I said, I'm talking on behalf of Andy Hergesheimer related to the softball stuff. And he told me today, he's so limited out there. He's got 2 fields, which used to be 4. He wants to have tournaments out there. He wants to bring people into Whitefish that will spend money at the bar, spend money on lodging, spend money on food. But he can't do that with what he's got out there right now because the fields aren't in a condition to hold a tournament like that. Additionally, he said, I know you guys are putting the lacrosse fields in out there, but it's been 4 years now, and not having those 2 fields affects how many teams he can have for the adult league. It affects your income off adult programs and looking at your parks budget. Every year, adult programs are anticipated to bring in the tune of $3,000, and every year it looks like they're bringing in less than a third of that. And I think a big part of that is because of the condition of the fields. Additionally, I'm looking in the budget, and I see adult softball as a line item, but no money going towards it. So it begs the question, why is it even in the budget? And if it is going to be in the budget, why wouldn't we put a little money towards it? Another issue in the park budget I'd like to talk about real quick is the cash in lieu for subdividers. When the subdivision is created, part of that process or part of those funds goes towards the city for parks, park dedication. The park dedication fund is as far as I can see, is strictly for development and acquisition. There's nothing in there for maintenance of our existing parks. And I see in the west corridor, you guys have it divvied up into 3 different corridors. The west corridor has a budget of $40,000 in it right now. And it looks like that money is going towards a nature reserve of some type. I'm not sure the specifics of that, but what I'd like to see in next year's budget is less money towards acquisition, less money towards development, and let's maintain what we have. Because right now, the corridor, the median in Highway 93 is getting more attention than these fields, and we're missing out on that. That's all I have. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Mr. Bestwick. Brenda.
Hello, I'm Brenda Guzman. I live at 21 Willowbrook Close. And to continue with what Andy was talking about, I also think that it's incredibly important that we do allocate more money to our Parks Department for the maintenance of our existing parks. For the Grouse Mountain Fields in particular, as Andy was saying, they're hazardous right now. You know, there's a number of knee and ankle injuries that are happening out there that could easily be prevented with a well-maintained field. Those fields used to be some of the best in the state, and now they are, you know, the joke is that well, we should spray for weeds, oh, but then we won't have anything but dirt left here. You know, the soccer programs and tournaments bring in a ton of people when we hold them. The Summer Games tournament alone that we have historically brings in somewhere 500 people. A conservative estimate from Helena tournaments is that each one of those people are spending about $118 per day here. Our numbers for these programs have been in decline. We adults really don't have a place to host these things. As it is now, we've kind of gotten a special thing to host the summer games out at the Smith Fields, but as far as any of our other tournaments, we just can't have them because we can't invite people to come play at fields that are in a state where their health is at risk, honestly, playing out there. So we are losing revenue to the city, and a substantial amount. So income from the tournaments. In addition, you know, the adult league pays the city of Whitefish $1,000 approximately to hold our co-recreation summer league out there, and we would just like that money to go directly back into the maintenance of those fields. I know that when the fields were dedicated, it was with the understanding that the golf course would do a lot of the maintenance or all of the maintenance possibly. I know the golf course does still mow it. We have such a huge soccer community in this area. We've got lots of workers that are willing and able to step up and do some of the maintenance. You know, we've got avenues for some fundraising, but what we need is a short-term budget to get those fields back into a decent condition, and then a long-term budget to maintain those. By doing it, you know, like I said, we can again begin to host more things here as we had in the past, and I'm sure that the city would more than see a return on investing in those fields with maintenance costs. I think that's about it.
Thanks, Brenda.
Mark Galbraith, Moose Trail out in Happy Valley. I'm the treasurer for the Flathead Rapids Youth Soccer Club, which would be the youth soccer programs that take place here in Whitefish in the North Valley. I represent about 600 families from Whitefish who have children who play soccer in our programs. We have probably 300 more from surrounding areas who also participate in our programs. The bulk of our participation in programs take place at Smith Fields. The cost for one child to participate in one program at Smith Fields is $35. Okay? PWK provides lawn, cutting of the lawn, fertilizing, and water. Okay? We provide the rest. We have to line the fields ourselves. We have to provide the goals and the nets, and we have to maintain those. To do that, and to keep costs affordable for it, we go through a lot of volunteerism to try to help take care of some of that. By comparison, Kalispell has Kids Sport, okay, a sports complex somewhat similar to ours. Okay, the charge for a player per program there is $25, but the city does take care of the nets and the goals. Okay, they have no other responsibilities that are put back on to the soccer clubs there. The city does put in money to Kids Sport, substantial amounts of money in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintain the programs there, whereas PWK gets nothing. That burden of a lack of support from the city on that gets placed back on the young families with the young kids who are putting players out there on those fields. We run this rec program over in Columbia Falls. It costs us $1.70 per player to run a program over there for the kids in Sioux Falls at their fields. So as you can see in Whitefish, we get hurt by that. And one of our biggest things that we have for our programs is that we never, ever want finances to be a hindrance for a child to come out and participate in our programs, or any program for that matter. Our scholarship program helps cover that. But again, to take care of this stuff requires fundraising to cover these expenses. I know we hear a lot of talk about affordable housing in Whitefish, but for this situation, in terms of providing maintenance money to help out with the sports complex that provides a huge benefit to you, I'd really like you to consider in your budgeting in the future affordable living in Whitefish. If we have a family, a young family with 2 kids playing in 2 programs, it's $140 just for field use fees on it, versus $7 for the same situation in Columbia Falls. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Don.
Hi, I'm Don Bestwick, and I live at 372 Sawtooth. I'm glad I could remember my address. I just want to reiterate some of the stuff these guys are talking about. And again, first of all, as a user of parks and stuff, you know, I think myself and people who use the park have a responsibility and should have skin in the game of using the park. On the other hand, too, I think, especially in the case of Project Whitefish Kids, in the mid-1990s, there was a group of 10 of us that raised $1.5 million to build the park. We gave the park to the cities basically so we didn't have to pay taxes on the land. And then we have totally taken over management of the park. Everything that's gone out there, from repaving parking lots to rebuilding irrigation systems and drainage systems and aerating the grass and trying to keep it safe so we don't get the lumps and bumps like they're having at Grouse Mountain, we have taken care of. We have done it through fundraising, and as Mark said, we have to pay a user fee from the kids. The other thing is, I know that our park looks good on the city brochures, because of a city of this size, you're supposed to have X amount of acreage for sports parks. Through private funding, Project Whitefish Kids has given that gift to the city. We do not expect at any time for the city to management to provide a labor force. We continue to be willing to take care of all that. Again, I think we use the park, we have skin in the game, and I think for 16 years now we've had a hell of a lot of skin in the game. So in the future, I would hope that we could at least get some maintenance funding from the city. By no means do we expect the city to finance that park, but some maintenance to help with it, I think, is worthwhile. The other thing is, and these guys have brought up, these parks bring in revenue to the city. They bring in money to the tax funds. They put money in the pockets of restaurants, hotels, motels, gift shops, hardware stores, all this stuff. Subway sells out sandwiches every time there's a baseball tournament in town. So we benefit the city. We bring a lot to the city. But the most important thing is we provide places for 1,000 kids to play. People from our community, there's over 1,000 kids that register in lacrosse, softball, soccer, baseball, and that is an incredible benefit to this city, and it's been a total gift to the city. And the same with Grouse Mountain. It has brought in the past tons of teams from Canada, all over the place. And all they are asking for is some financial help. And they're willing to put skin in the game to do a lot of the labor to fix their fields, but they need some money. And the Grouse Mountain fields are a wreck. There's no other way to put it. They're a wreck. They shouldn't be played on. And, you know, they look nice from a distance because they're sort of green, but that's about all you can say about them. So again, I just want you to be aware of in the future that we are put on your radar for what we do for the city, and that we should get a little bit of financial help. And if you guys can increase your fund toward maintenance with the Parks Department, and some of that goes to us, it's a win-win for everybody. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Don.
Hi, Matt Ford, 1344 4th Street East in Whitefish. I'm also one of the soccer clan. It's a game of passion. And I just, again, want to put it on the, first, thank you guys for the opportunity to come to you and present, you know, in such a nice place. But we got all this, you know, incredible energy going forward in this town. We can't forget where we've been. I started playing soccer at Grouse Mountain in the early 1990s, and I just can't tell you all the wonderful memories that have enriched my life by playing soccer there. Those memories are being lost because we can't play. The nets get left up all winter. They're in poor shape. The nets that keep balls from going into the forest are completely rotten and fallen down. So it seems like the city has turned its attention away from a center of socialization, a center of recreation. Again, I want to reiterate that I think it's time that we turn our attention back to that so that we can continue a long and rich tradition. I'm sure many people here have either played on those fields or played softball. We can't lose sight of what has been in the past places for our community to gather that have been of high quality, and those are degrading. So thanks very much, and I'm done.
Thanks, Matt. Who's next?
Hi, Kevin Abel, 441 Caro Avenue. I'm the new CEO of North Valley Hospital here, and looking forward to working with you all and the community. And I think I'll start off with a compliment. As CEO of Lake Chelan Community Hospital and Clinics for the last 9 years, I got to know the city council and the city administrators and mayors well over that time. And right before I left, one of the things they held up as something that Whitefish did very well was a trail system. So they were looking at you in terms of how to develop their comprehensive trail plan. So big compliment to this city. A second thing that the city council there really struggled with and had to work on was affordable housing. So I hope you all know that this is a typical thing that you all have to work with, and Chelan being a tourist town as well and relatively expensive to live in had some of the same issues I think that Whitefish does. So I don't have any commentary on any specific projects or things like that, but some of the same issues that we faced as a major employer as the small hospital in Chelan, we face here as the hospital at North Valley Hospital. So approximately 36% of our employees actually live in the Whitefish area, and the rest live outside of it. We do consider places like Columbia Falls and as a part of our service area. But all that being said, there has been some ongoing discussion at the hospital for some time about the need for more affordable housing. Again, very difficult topic to work on for, I think, city councils across the country. Similar again to Chelan, but I appreciate you working on that, and I appreciate you understanding the need as employers as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Welcome to Whitefish. Appreciate you coming tonight. Further comment tonight? I had just a little bit of information to share in response to some of the park comments. I'll be brief because I usually don't respond to public comment, but I hope the public's aware that this Parks Department manages over 20 parks. We take care of greenways, medians. We understand as a council that we are struggling with acquisition versus maintenance, and we've actually started prioritizing and have the maintenance of our current facilities. The one additional park that we added the past 2 years was a donated parcel by a gentleman who passed away in town. We applied for grants to help develop that park in part. It's going to be a great addition to our community. In addition, as you know, we manage dozens of programs for our students, and we manage dozens of miles of bike and pedestrian trails within our city. It's loved to death, the system, and unfortunately, we're only left with about 3 different funding mechanisms, one being 5% of our resort tax, which generates about $200,000 a year that can be used with discretion for both maintenance and acquisition and improvements. We rely on user fees, and then, of course, general property taxes. When the Great Recession set in, the first department that was cut was parks, and we've slowly built the program back to a very energetic and competent group of individuals that I think are doing a phenomenal job. So with that said, we understand the dilemma. We will be focusing on that very topic as we go into the budget deliberations for FY19 and certainly for FY20 with city staff. So I appreciate the comments this evening. With that said, I will stay with the public. Any communications from volunteer boards in the audience? Volunteer board reports? Steve? Volunteer board? Okay. How about the council? Not seeing any. I'll move on to the consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the May 7th meeting minutes, or can I have a motion for approval? Andy?
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Williams. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Michelle. Which brings us on to item 7 this evening, which is a request for tax increment funds, a request from Nelson's Hardware to use tax increment funds to eliminate a blighted property for proposed location located at Highway 93 South, which is also the former Army Navy. Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm not going to say too much because I know Marilyn is going to stand up and say some things, so I don't want to steal all of the thunder. But my staff report is in the packet. This is, I believe, a great opportunity not only to eliminate blight in this area, but hopefully to kickstart, hopefully it's a catalyst to kickstart some other projects in that area to try to, dress up some of those metal buildings and replace them with something nice, just like what the Nelsons have in their plan. It's a great use of TIF dollars. This is exactly what TIF dollars should be used for. As you can see on the screen now, they've got a site plan that looks tremendous. They're asking for some assistance with some of the site prep to include some demolition of the current building that's there. And then also they want to grant to the city some right-of-way. And so they're looking at granting about 5 feet of right-of-way on Commerce Street and about 10 feet of right-of-way up on 18th Street. And it's going to allow for some terrace areas and sidewalks, and so this area is going to, really be beautified, I believe. I think what they're asking is reasonable, and so my recommendation is that you approve that. But with that, I'll put it over to Marilyn.
Thanks, Adam. Marilyn.
Council, Mayor, happy to be here tonight. Marilyn Nelson. I live at 565 Blanchard Lake Road in Whitefish. I guess most everything is in the letter. Did you have any questions?
Thanks, Marilyn. Any questions for Marilyn? Richard.
When I look at by the way, I'm going to miss being able to walk, but I can still ride my bicycle. So
we're going to have bike racks.
on the Highway 93 stretch, is that sidewalk? I couldn't tell if there's enough in that boulevard or that median strip so that when the state plows come through in the wintertime, it doesn't load that sidewalk. Is that going to be an issue? I know it is on the other side and on some of the other sidewalks along 93.
I'd like to defer that to Bruce.
Okay. Well,
Bruce is in the audience.
and if it isn't, is there enough room to maybe make some adjustment? That's my only concern.
I'm not sure it's going to be a whole lot different than what it is right now there, but I'll let Bruce speak to that.
Good evening. Yeah, the sidewalk along 93 is removed from the curb by about 7 feet. So, you know, as far as storage, that's generally enough. Of course, when the plows go by at 40, they're spraying it. I don't think there's anything we can do about that. You know, there are the stormwater detention basins there. So I think we're about at the limit of how far we can move those sidewalks. But I think when you guys are here, you'll have better maintenance on that area too.
Yeah, because it'll be your responsibility to plow it, right? I
Well,
think.
the city plows it now.
Yeah.
Will we continue?
I would assume so.
Okay.
Sure. I know that we will be taking care of the landscaping out there, and the proposal does call for abandoning the existing ingress from the highway there, and landscaping that approximately 40 feet plus or minus. So there'll be additional grass, shrubs, potentially trees in there that will make that area, I think, even a little bit more beautiful. But our intention is to landscape the entire project with additional trees, shrubs, flowers, to really try to beautify that spot. I'm especially excited about the opportunity to have trees, sidewalks, boulevards, along both of the north and south boundaries of that property, which right now the existing building encroaches onto, I think, the easement there. You know, when we looked at potentially remodeling that building, that was one of the things that bothered me the most about that, is the fact that the building would have been grandfathered to stay there, I believe, but it's too close to the road, and would never have allowed any kind of pedestrian access as the community grows out in that direction and more people are walking out there in the future. That was never going to be a good solution. So in moving our building north and allowing enough space there for that to actually be quite beautifully landscaped is, I think, going to be a real positive thing. And then also along 18th Street too, there's a plan to add trees and streetlight and irrigated landscaping in that area too. So.
Further questions, Richard? How about from the council for Bruce or Marilyn? Marilyn, quick question. If this is approved tonight, when do you envision work beginning at the site in terms of demolition, site prep?
I believe that would probably happen toward the end of July. We're actually fairly far along. We've begun actual architecture and engineering for the project because we've met all our feasibility targets. And so we're looking to actually accelerate the closing date by a few weeks, which would mean that we would close in the first couple of weeks of July, and that would be when we would want to start demolition.
Great.
So we're going to be a little bit behind on our permitting, but working very diligently on those pieces.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and for your consideration. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Marilyn. Turn it back to council for discussion or a motion preferably. Frank.
I would like to move to approve the request from Notice and Hardware to use tax increment funds to eliminate the blight at the proposed location on Highway 93 South.
In the amount of $100,000?
In the amount of $100,000.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Hildner. Further discussion?
I would just like to say that if of all the projects that have been brought to this council in my presence here, this will do, in my view, the most good in terms of a use of tax increment funds to cure blight and really make something of that area. I hate to lose them downtown. God, I hate it. But this is going to be a great project.
Agreed. Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously, Michelle. Good luck with the project. We'll move on to item 8, which are our 3 public hearings this evening. We will be holding individual public comment periods for each hearing. We'll start with item 8A, which is ordinance 18-15, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Whitefish, Montana, approving the Trail View preliminary plat and planned unit development to develop a 58-lot single-family residential neighborhood on the property located at the corner of Monaghan and Vorman Roads, located at 1180 Vorman Road in Whitefish. And this is a continuation from our May 7th meeting, and we did hold the public hearing open, so we will be holding public comment shortly following our staff's report. Wendy.
Good evening. So again, as the mayor mentioned, you folks held a public hearing and left the public hearing open until tonight, and you postponed action in order to further review the application and the public comments, because it was a pretty big packet. You also requested some information about the Creekwood subdivision when that was approved back in 2001, and more information on the now expired Bridgewater Trails, which this property is part of that subdivision that expired back in 2009. And in reviewing those 2 files, we noted that both the subdivisions included a condition of approval that a note was to be placed on the face of the plat, that a waiver to the creation of a special improvement district be provided for improvements to Vorman Park Avenue up to East 10th Street. So that certainly is a condition that you folks could add, and I've drafted one if you would want to do that. The other item the council could consider is to review the resort tax street list and consider moving Park Avenue up on the project list. The current list is from 2014, and this project from south of 7th Street along Park Avenue is project number 17. So that would place Park Avenue about 20 years out from today. The Public Works Director says it's good practice to re-rank those projects every couple of years based on current road conditions and project priorities. So that is another item you could consider. I did put together a memo that was at the end of your packet about both Creekwood and Bridgewater. Creekwood was approved back in 2001. There was an earlier version that was not approved by the council. And then in between that earlier version that was kind of a cul-de-sac off of Vorman Road, the city undertook the Southeast Transportation Plan and recommended an extension of Asher Avenue down to Vorman Road. And so the subsequent application, which is the one that you see out in the field right now, shows Asher Avenue connecting all the way down to Vorman. So that project was approved. As part of that project too, they provided 2 future connections to the property to the east. In the southeast corner, there's a 60-foot right-of-way, and then along the east portion of that subdivision, there's also a 60-foot right-of-way over to the Barnes property. The Bridgewater Trail project was approved by the council in 2006. It provided 82 single-family homes. It expired in 2009. Just some of the transportation elements with this project were they were required to upgrade Monaghan Road to an urban standard with curb, gutter, boulevard, sidewalk, street trees. They also had the SID waiver, condition of approval. And then they were also obligated to construct the bike path along the entire frontage of Vorman Road between Monaghan and Shady River Lane. So I included those minutes and site plans for you. And I think the applicant is here to talk to you as well. They had a little summary of some traffic information that's been handed out to you, and I think their engineer is here to talk about that.
Okay. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report before we hear from the traffic engineer? Thanks, Wendy.
Hello, good evening. My name is Nicole Costello. I'm with Morrison Merrily. Address is 125 Schoolhouse Loop here in Kalispell, or in Kalispell, not here in Kalispell. I'd like to take the time to highlight some key points from the traffic impact study that will hopefully address some questions that were brought up at the meeting earlier this month. I first wanted to point out that the traffic study for this project utilized the most up-to-date trip generation manual published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. This is the most widely accepted resource for estimating vehicle trip generation and is the required method for the Montana Department of Transportation as well as the City of Whitefish. At full build-out, Trailview subdivision will in fact generate an average of 684 trips per weekday. I know that was a
per week or per week?
Per weekday, Monday through Friday, per day.
Monday through Friday. Of these 684 trips, roughly 233 are estimated to contribute to the Creekwood subdivision. The 684 trips represent an overall 18% increase over the 2021 originally projected traffic volumes for that area. We look specifically at the industry standard peak hour times as well. And this is specifically from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. for the AM and from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the PM. Trailview is expected to generate an average of 56 trips from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., with 20 of those using Creekwood subdivision. For the peak PM hours of 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., Trailview is expected to generate an average of 62 trips, with 21 of those using Creekwood. Looking at how this affects the intersections, which specifically we're looking at Vorman and Creekwood, and then Creekview and Creekwood intersections. What we observe when we look at the intersections is the waiting time. That is specifically what these traffic studies look at. The intersections are currently operating at a level of service A, which translates to a 10-second waiting time or less. We typically like to operate at a level of service C or better, which translates to a 25-second waiting period or less. Looking at the graphs here, this is specifically for the Creekwood Drive Vermin Road intersection, and this is showing the waiting periods. Starting on the left side is the current waiting period, then moving to the left, it's the 2021 estimated waiting period, and then the 2021 estimated period with the incorporation of Trailview. These intersections will continue to operate at effective levels with the inclusion of Trailview subdivision, and based on the 2021 projected traffic volumes, plus the added Trailview traffic volumes, these intersections are capable of handling 3 to 4 times the traffic before reaching a level of service D, which is represented by the bar on the far right. This is showing the same information for Creekwood Drive and Creekview Drive intersection. And as you can see, the same applies here. Actually, on the PM side, we could handle up to 12.2 times more traffic before reaching that level of service D. Based on the results of the traffic study, based off the numerical data, no additional improvements are necessary to mitigate existing traffic operations for existing or projected 2021 traffic conditions with the inclusion of the Trailview subdivision traffic. I hope that clarifies some things, and if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a quick question, unless someone from council does. How was the 2021 estimated total traffic volume calculated? What were the assumptions in terms of build out?
So that's part of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the manual. It's the most up-to-date, what we used was the most up-to-date information at that time, which was from September of 2017. And it just assumes in this case, that it's like the number we use is called the 210, and it corresponds to single unit developments that are not a part of a condo or an apartment, and it just makes an assumption for that area.
Does it take into consideration the underlying zoning and project out, build out based on our specific zoning?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions for Nicole? There may be later.
Okay.
So if you don't mind sticking around, which I'm sure you will anyway.
I will, thank you.
Richard, did you have a question now?
No, I was just getting the microphone out of the way.
Thanks, Nicole. Before we go to public hearing, I will invite the applicant to speak to the council, and then we will move on to public comment.
Thank you. Stephen Flink, 2305 Westbury Avenue, Littleton, Colorado. So just wanted to touch again on some high-level points about the project. I know we went into quite a bit of detail last time, and then we can dive in further as needed with questions later on. So I wanted to touch briefly on the Whitefish Affordable Housing Needs Assessment that was completed in 2016 and some of their findings. This study identified that the inventory of affordable homes in the Whitefish area is very low. The Trailview subdivision will provide 58 affordable homes. 58 affordable homes. The study also found that homes below $300,000 are typically older and in poor condition. The Trailview subdivision will provide 58 new construction homes. The new construction that is being built in the Whitefish area right now is not targeting the local workforce price point. The Trailview subdivision specifically targeting local workforce housing. The assessment found that single-family homes with garage and storage are preferred product types. The Trailview subdivision is providing 58 single-family homes with garage and storage spaces. Finally, the study forecasted 400 ownership units are required through 2020. Trailview, with the 58 provided units, will be providing 15% of this need. Wanted to talk briefly about proximity, where this site lives within the city of Whitefish, and its ideal location within the city limits. It's in close proximity to the school system, healthcare, retail options, recreation, city services, fire, police, and job opportunities. The proximity to all these services and amenities makes this an ideal location for a workforce housing project type. I wanted to touch briefly on the 2007 growth policy, which identifies this area as urban. The growth policy also encourages development within the city limits before development of surrounding rural lands. The Trailview property is within city limits and is identified as an area ideal for growth. Infrastructure improvements, 2018 Extension of Services Plan. The plan continues to identify this property for urban growth. The plan states that many areas on the outskirts of Whitefish have no nearby utility services and infrastructure available. The Trailview property is adjacent to the public water system. The public water system runs adjacent to the site, the wastewater system, and finally, the traffic study identifies the road infrastructure is adequate to handle the increased vehicle activity from the subdivision. Trailview subdivision is providing a 10-foot right-of-way expansion along the west side of Monaghan Road. This will assist in upgrading the road from a county road to the Whitefish standards and will allow for future room for sidewalks improvements as well. The Trailview subdivision is participating in the improvement of Monaghan Road from a dirt road to a paved road adjacent to the property. Drainage improvements. Regrading of Monaghan Road will eliminate standing water along the road. No basements or crawl spaces are being implemented to reduce negative impacts of groundwater displacement on properties to the west. The grading of the site and the stormwater management plan will also help to mitigate negative stormwater impacts to the west. Park and recreation improvements. 20% of open space is required by the PUD. The Trailview subdivision as currently drawn is providing 66% open space. 1 acre of park dedication is required. We're providing 1.5 acre park at the north end of the site, at the corner of Monaghan and Vorman Road. We're also providing a 1/2 acre easement along the west of the site so that the Rock Sun Trail can be extended to the north. The density bonus, 10% or 6 units are required to receive the density increase of 7 units per acre, and that's an increase from 4 units per acre. 10% is required. This subdivision is providing 100% or 58 units as affordable. Smaller houses, smaller lots, this equals affordable homes and more open space. Open space that relates to adjacent agricultural uses and is being given to the city to improve parks, trail networks, and recreation opportunities. We'd like this project to be considered as a transition project. The area is identified for urban growth. The area is predominantly single-family use. The Trailview subdivision is proposing single-family use, not multifamily. Smaller houses, smaller lots equals affordability and more open space for public improvements. Improved, extended, and added infrastructure. Improving stormwater conditions for adjacent landowners, improvement to Monaghan Road, and utility infrastructure for future development in the area. The project is helping to address the affordable housing issues identified in the 2016 Whitefish Affordable Housing Needs Assessment. So finally, I'd like to ask the City Council carefully consider the numerous benefits this project will bring to the community of Whitefish. Adjacent and future subdivisions will benefit from improved stormwater management, road infrastructure, utility infrastructure, an extended trail system, and a large park dedication. Employers hiring in this community will have a strengthened local labor pool to hire from, and the people who live in this development will finally have attainable housing in Whitefish. With that, is there any other questions or?
Thanks very much for your report. Any questions for the applicant's representative? Richard.
Quick question. On your city trail extension on the west side of the proposal, it dead ends in the parkland. Will that trail then extend over to Vorman Road?
Yes, so.
At some point, or we?
Yes, in the last meeting, we did identify that we were asking council to consider the applicant not pay for the trail itself because we are providing the easement for the trail. But the easement does run all the way from the south of the site all the way to the north. How that trail then crosses through the parkland dedication really is up for the Parks Department. There is opportunity to run the trail along Vorman and connect into the sidewalk, Creekview, or there's opportunity at the 60-foot easement that is at the southeast corner of the Creekview subdivision to just cross directly across Vorman at some point and avoid running adjacent along the road that's unimproved at this time.
And is that also a sidewalk that's shown on Monaghan Road?
There is no sidewalk proposed to be along Monaghan Road. We're considering that the trail would be the connection and keep people off of Monaghan Road. It also keeps people away from the vehicular entrances to the subdivision. There's two of them. If pedestrians cross at the west side of the site, they will cross no vehicle access points.
Oh, I see. I guess I was confused by the dotted line on Monaghan and then what looks to be a sidewalk along Monaghan Road right
Correct.
there.
That would be future. That is not proposed for this development.
Okay.
The dashed line is the property line.
All right, thanks.
I have a follow-up to that question. I don't think you're not going to be able to extend the city trail north across the parkland dedication because of the stormwater conveyance that you would need to deal with.
Yes,
from my perspective.
Yeah,
I
there's
could
a
be
critical
wrong, but
conveyance through there.
there's a rather large conveyance that drains several hundred acres, as your stormwater engineer pointed out at the last meeting. So my question to you is, would the developer be willing to extend the easement of the city trail easement east to Monaghan Road, as well as a dedicated easement north to Vorman Road, with the idea that we could potentially make that improvement as part of the build out of this development, connecting it into either a separated bike and pedestrian trail on Vorman Road to a pedestrian activated crossing that would allow for the safe movement of children, bikers, and walkers into the Creekview subdivision? Would the developer be willing to include that as part of his improvement to the project?
Jerry Dunker, 84 Armory Road. Yeah, I just wanted to, since the last meeting, we kind of thought about this a little more. And also with the new budget coming out and again, hearing tonight about a lot of the funds being needed, I'd like to kind of maybe take that off. We asked for it not to be included as a condition, but maybe we could leave that as a condition. But one thing we'd like to propose is condition 21 that has the percentages of the workforce housing. I think we could put this trail in. We want to put this trail in. It's important not only to this neighborhood, but to the whole community. And I think what you're saying too is along the lines we're thinking is to work with the park to somehow go through there and connect at the corner of Vorman and Monaghan. And there is an easement right across there that the city has for future road, but there might even be a way to maybe do a temporary trail that would connect right into the sidewalks of Creekwood. And then in theory, in reality, you could get from the schools all the way to Smith Fields, only crossing Vorman and JP Road. And JP is a intersection already. But anyway, to get back to the proposal, what we're thinking is if we knock down the percentages from 50 and 50 to 40 and 40, that would give us some leeway to maybe spread this cost out in a free market model if needed. I do want to leave the language that says at least 50 in there because our goal from the beginning of this was to be 100% traditional deed restrictions. This being such a unique project and a first time for this area, it's kind of hard to to determine the demand right now, so we're kind of leaving ourselves some leeway. If the demand isn't there for all the traditional, we could still use the light deed restrictions. And in this one, you know, again, I would rather spread the cost of this out over a few homes than all of them and try and keep the cost down on these. We've also been approached by a potential donor for this trail, but at this point, that's just a dream and a wish. But if that would come true, then these could go right back to the, you know, the 100%. So it's just kind of a proposal to help share the cost of this. I mean, we want to put this trail, and I understand there's probably not funding available for it for quite a while. So I just wanted to, I guess, make that change potentially, to leave it in as on us, but we need to have some leeway in there to pay for it.
And can you repeat what would that
So
change
on
be?
condition 21, it has where it says units to be deed restricted for local workers will give first priority. That line says may not exceed 50%. And then the next one has the interspersed throughout development, and at least 50% is for the traditional deed restrictions. So, and we could even leave the traditional at 50 and put the other one to 30, if you want to just keep the, or just 40 and 40. And again, it's just a mechanism that hopefully we can spread out the cost of this trail over just a few homes instead of the whole development. We're really trying to keep the price down on these.
Okay. I'm sure there may be questions after we go through the public hearing, but thanks for the information.
But I think, is that what you were thinking with the trail, is to kind of somehow diagonally go through that, or somehow go through that parkland to end up at Dorman instead of just going straight and straight?
Yes. Yeah. As part of the build out with
Yes.
phase 3.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. Thanks. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be ordinance 18-15, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Just a couple comments. We did hold the public hearing open from the last meeting. Your comments were entered into the public record on May 7th and were included with the information we received in our packet, which was also available to the general public. If you have any additional to add, now is your opportunity. For time's sake, I am going to request that we limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker. So we can start with the list I have, and it certainly doesn't preclude you from commenting, but we'll start with Mark.
Hi, Council. I guess the concerns I have...
Name and address for the record, please.
Oh, Mark Daniels, 1053 Creekview Court. We live we back up to Warman Road, and I know that there's been a traffic study done, but there's more than just vehicles going down that road. There's no sidewalks or any kind of pedestrian improvements on either side of that road. Basically, right now, there's just drainage swales. And there's actually an amazing amount of pedestrian traffic that goes on Vorman Road, whether it's from Smithfields or if it's from Creekwood going through Park Avenue to visit friends or to the grocery store or whatnot. But even just tonight, just sitting on my back deck, there's probably 20, 30 kids on bikes and families walking dogs just past the back of our house. And right now, there's no city improvements to account for a development that's going to increase the traffic by, I believe, 600 per day. Is that?
684 per weekday, so Monday through Friday.
Each day?
Each day, daily.
So that seems pretty significant. And then the zoning, from what I understand, was 32 homes were zoned for that property, but there's 58 being proposed. So that seems like almost 100% increase in the request for density in somewhat of a rural area. So anyways, those are my concerns, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mark, for your comments. Who's next? Sir.
Evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Niles Bauer. I'm at 1025 Creekview Drive, and I'm at that corner of Creekwood and Creekview. So we see the traffic coming through there, and it is a three-way stop, but it's being treated as a yield. And we've had officers come into the area, and thank you for watching that area. But when people come in, they look quickly and they just go. And my wife tonight watching, and she saw 4 out of 5 just drive right on through. And we have at least a dozen children right there in that area. So very concerning, and when you see what I read from the traffic study was going to be 80 in the morning, that hour in the morning, going to 110. that it's going to be a large group coming through there, so a little concern there. My second concern still, as much as I'm for workforce housing, I think it's wonderful you guys are doing that. I think about this project and what happens in 10 years as the first set come in and buy that, the resale, if there's no way to control that, it turns into vacation homes for people from all over the world to come ski or to come recreate. And where's the pride in that for the community? So just comments to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Niles. Who's next?
Hi there, my name is Dr. Erin Flaherty. I live at 1060 Creekwood Drive, which is at the intersection of Creekwood and Creekview Drive. I recently bought a home in September, and one of the reasons I bought that home there is its proximity to the hospital, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the safety to the community. What has not been mentioned, and I've written letters to twice when letters have been open to public comment, is the physician's access to the hospital. We all know how busy Highway 93 gets in the summer. Monaghan Road is a bypass to the hospital. As an anesthesiologist, I provide emergency services. Now that can be an elective case, or it can be a stab wound to the chest, which I have been called in the middle of the night. I support affordable housing. I've been a physician on staff at Aspen Valley Hospital, where you can definitely see that there is an issue with affordable housing. I've watched my friends in that community who are architects, engineers, nurses, pharmacists, speech language pathologists, they've all benefited from affordable housing. However, that's done well, but if it's not monitored, those affordable housing units can often be turned into party units, for lack of a better term. And doing such, that becomes not an ideal community to house the additional workforce. I just want to speak a little to the density of this project as well. I do think the design, Stephen, is very tasteful. I really like the mountain modern design. However, as this community grows, you've got single-family homes. Those kids are going to grow. Kids get cars. So we have these units developed for 1 to 2 cars, but what happens when other people bring in roommates or temporary roommates? Do we have the adequate amount of parking? Regarding traffic study, 1060 Creekwood Drive, I'm right on that intersection. This winter, the ruts were so bad outside my house, I could no longer park my car in my driveway. I had to park it on the street. And I will be making daily calls to the city to make sure that that street is plowed, because I feared that I could not get out in case of an emergency when I was on call. Creekview Drive is very well plowed, but that side street is not plowed. The other thing I just wanted to benefit or just suggest to the community of Whitefish is that I've also been involved recently in some discussions with Big Sky and my HOA there. Big Sky Transportation just recently received a $10 million federal Tiger grant. Now, what this is going to do for this community is provide turn lanes, pedestrian tunnels, and a bus system. It's hypothesized that this is also going to help with the infrastructure demands and also positively affect the affordable housing units that are being developed there. Now, I would like to suggest that the community of Whitefish look into this, because this could benefit this unit and the other developments that are going in. The final thing I just want to comment on is that all of these traffic studies and the affordable housing needs are based on 2016 and 2018 numbers. No one's commented on the additional housing units that are proposed along Highway 93 and how those are going to affect traffic along Monaghan Road and through Creekwood. So as we are discussing, future growth and development, I would argue, let's put in our infrastructure first to provide safe access to the community to access that hospital, especially during busy summer times. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Laura Hutton, P.O. Box 944, Whitefish. Hello everyone. As I mentioned, I'm Laura Hutton, and I'm a huge proponent of the Trails View project. It will enable folks like myself to finally put down roots and have a place to really call home in the community we love. I've loved this town for a long time, almost 10 years. Here I've developed a huge community of friends. When I leave on adventures, I get to come home to my Whitefish family. I don't want to live anywhere else, not in a neighboring town or county or state. I'm a speech-language pathologist. I moved here fresh out of graduate school to fill a need in the school districts here. I still work full-time in a school, plus I maintain a very small private practice billing Medicaid for most of my families. I certainly didn't move here for a teacher pay scale salary or the meager Medicaid reimbursements, but all the special children I serve here are worth it. It's a good thing I'm not planning on moving away because new grads in my field aren't moving here to fill school positions. Housing is too expensive. Also, in past years, I've always worked evenings in skilled nursing facilities, such as the nearby Vets Home, and as far as Big Fork and Eureka to help fill the deficit of skilled therapists in these settings as well. I've moved many times in Whitefish, so much that I've lived in almost every neighborhood, and if I haven't lived everywhere, I've house sat or babysat for locals in every corner of this town. And sadly, I'm currently moving again, but this time not by choice, but rather due to our Whitefish rental market's shift towards tourism-based short-term rentals, which is leaving folks like myself, the backbone of this community, without affordable housing options, neither in rentals nor in real estate. So I'm 35, I'm finally mentally and emotionally ready to buy a home. I've been a professional for 9.5 years, and I serve an important role in our community, just like a firefighter or nurse or teacher or ski resort employee. I'm not married, and I'll be buying my first home independently without family support. I'm obviously not financially ready, given the current Whitefish market, however. But enough of that, let's look at the bright side. I've been approved for $250,000 home, give or take a little bit, and the Trails View project is a creative, lower impact, community-minded housing project with a financial bottom line that I can handle. It will allow year-round folks like myself to live within our means. I also see it as an opportunity to grow even more connected with people, to live happier, healthier, and greener in ways that will help our town as a whole. I envision carpooling to skiing, growing gardens together, riding our cruisers, instead of our cars to, let's say, the market, to pick up our veggies and flowers, supporting our hardworking local farmers and artists. Trails View will help our town stay a vibrant, wholesome place to live rather than a gentrified, touristy town with just bedroom communities nearby, filling the road with a steady stream of daily commuters. We can feel that happening already, and it makes me really sad. I've lived in Colorado mountain towns, but Whitefish is a real town, a real home, a real community, a place full of wonderful people who share a bond. I don't want to see my special place here turn into a facade of a community. Thanks for recognizing that we need some affordable housing for people who want to be here year-round, who work hard here year-round. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate your comments tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. I'm Jeffrey Sanders, 1019 Creekview Drive. And I spoke before, and I won't repeat, but I've just been taking notes for tonight. And what the previous speaker said speaks right to the needs of Whitefish for the affordable housing. The theory is good that we heard from the engineers. I'm here to look at some things that were said. Mr. Dunker said himself that since the last meeting, I've thought about this a little more. It seems to me there's still a little more. The theory is good. There seems to be a lot of splintering with this, and to rush forward with this, I see a need for the housing. I don't see a need to put this through right now. Dr. Flaherty mentioned the additional cars. There's so many other things. What the owner of Nelson's did was move from downtown to an other place. That's growth with thought, with possibility, with infrastructure around it. I think this doesn't. What we've heard before, is delivering density that we can't service, and that still is the issue here. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your comments. Dick.
I'm Dick Zollner, 1365 Warman Road. I'm just going to reiterate a little bit that I attended a lot of the growth policy meetings, probably more so than half the people that were members. And I've talked to a few of them that were on that board. And they're beginning to wonder if it was a waste of time. And that's terrible to ask citizens to volunteer to be on boards when a lot of the stuff they spent years putting forward, and it's like we're forgetting what was all done. And I think you guys are forgetting about this road that needs to go north and west. And without it, I've got a daughter-in-law that's got a friend in Whitefish now. She told me that the first grade class, the second grade class has 6 teachers. I was told I was wrong. They have 8. So we have 10 years now before we have these kind of numbers of kids even driving. And I don't know how you're going to get these cars around unless we get some more roads in. And you know where that road's got to go, but there's no easement yet to do it. So I would just say that things need to just settle down and wait till you get the proper roads in that'll handle all these cars. Crickwood, you've heard they can't take these kind of cars. And you know what's coming up with all the kids. So that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Dick. Any further comment tonight on this item? Please, Mr. Berg, you can just approach the mic, please.
I'm Bill Berg, live at 1078 Creekwood Drive. Lived there for 14 years. I'm one of the original people, probably the original 10. I've been on the board or an officer. I'm currently treasurer, have been for, I think, 13 years. I'd like to make a couple of comments about both traffic and the pedestrians, but I should have cited that I was also on the workforce housing, worked for 2 years on that project, so I'm very much in favor of the effort that was put forth. I'm not sure if I agree with all the solutions, but I know there was a lot of effort put forth. If you look at the diagram, it's a shame it doesn't come a little bit further to the north. What you're seeing north of the project is the back of the houses. I don't know if that'll work. Let's go back. I think it. What you see on the right is the last house in Creekwood. It's on lot 8. It's owned by the Sebrons. They're seasonal residents. And next to that, you can see the bare space. That property is owned by the city. At the eastern side of it, right at Gorman, there's a fire hydrant. Don't know why they put it there because they have to go through private property with a hose to service any fire that's in the community. In terms of pedestrian and I anticipate bicycle traffic, they have to get across Gorman. On the north side of Gorman, there is a large ditch that in high water, you wouldn't want to step into it. You'd probably get flowed down and through a culvert onto Brad's property, underneath and on into Cow Creek. It is high water. It's probably 3 feet deep, running at probably 5 or 6 knots, faster than you could probably walk. On the north side, there's no place to put a path. It's not wide enough. So you say, well, let's cross onto the city property, which is at the, well, you can see where Monaghan, it's the extension of Monaghan. That property runs into 2 backyards. One is the Sebrons, and the next one is the, I think it's the Larkins' home. About 5 or 6 years ago, the city approached the community whether they could acquire right-of-way between those 2 private properties, and both of them said, no, thank you. So there's no way to get through there unless you're going to condemn portions of their property to put a bike path or a walking path. I'm not sure you knew that. You can't see it unless you go walk the territory and actually live there, you wouldn't know it. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Bill. Rhonda.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm Rhonda Fitzgerald. I live at 412 Lupfer Avenue. I have spent quite a bit of time the last few years on various city committees, and the Whitefish Housing Needs Assessment from 2 years ago, which Mr. Flink quoted from and kind of took everything I was going to say, is, I think, the relevant document here. We know that 2 years ago, we already knew we needed 400 single-family, modest homes for purchase, close to downtown, with storage, a yard, and a garage. At that time, we all thought, how will we get those? A few can be had at the lower income range with federal tax bonds. A few can be had in the middle with some city subsidy, but primarily the market needs to come forward and build affordable housing for the men and women who work in Whitefish year-round. How do we get that? Well, this is an example of how we get it. This is a very well-conceived project. It's urban by the policy we have in place. It's close to downtown. It has good access to services. It's attractive. It's well-conceived. There's a ton of public benefit in it. I do think the bike path, which a lot of people will use for transportation, should be concurrent with the development, not later. But I would hate to see any of those 58 units not deed restricted because, you know, we have a huge problem with this vacation home thing, and it is gutting our neighborhoods and driving all the prices up, and the community is very uneasy about it on every front. And you have another project coming before you tonight for about the same amount of units, and they're the exact opposite of this. They're what the community is afraid of. This is a really good project, and if you deny this project, what developer will come forward with something like it? You need to set an example that you actually support this solution, because we can just forget the idea that the market will ever provide any housing for people who work here if you don't support it, I think. So I had a lot of other things I was going to say, but Laura said them all, because she is a perfect example of the person who needs a place to buy, to live here, continue to be part of the community. And these are small. These are 800 to 1,200 square feet, I believe. This is not 4 kids. You know, I think that the estimate for the school travel trips during the day that are the ones that would go through Creekwood is probably high, because only, I think it's 22% of the homes in Whitefish have school-age children in them. And I would bet that the percentage in this development would be even lower. So I hope that you will approve this, because it's really a great thing for Whitefish. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
I wanted to clear up a couple of things with deed restrictions, because I think that's been kind of confusing. So a typical deed restriction, again, these are going to be developed with the Housing Authority, and I see we have a budget for a new housing coordinator of the city.
Just point of order, Mr. Mayor. Are we finished with the public hearing?
We're not finished with the public hearing.
Okay.
Then I would prefer to not hear from the applicant at this point.
Okay.
If you don't mind waiting, Jeff.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Further comment from the general public? Yes, ma'am, you can approach the podium.
I'm Kathy Shigo, 1045 Creekview Drive. And I just wanted to reiterate what Mark Daniels said about the number of walkers, the number of bikers, dogs, you know, women pushing strollers. It's a safety issue. And I think the affordable housing is great, but I think you have to get the infrastructure first. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Further comment from the public? Steve.
Hi, Mayor, council people. Steve Boone, 313 Shady River Lane. And I just want to speak to this real briefly. I spoke previously, but you know, this is a great development, great looking development, but it's the wrong location. And we talk about Creekwood as being the main access and the main egress from this area, but and then it's been said that maybe people aren't going to go to Creekwood because there won't be that many children. Well, then they're going to go down Park Avenue, and that's even worse. You know, it's just inadequate. All three ways to get out of this neighborhood between Creekwood, Monaghan Road, and Park Avenue just simply aren't adequate for more traffic. You know, I walk on Park Avenue a lot. I've seen it for a number of years, and it just can't handle more traffic in its current state of affairs. You know, there are a lot of people that walk, as has been testified, a lot of people that walk. There's a lot of people that ride. It's just, it's a good idea. It's the wrong location. And a mistake once made is a mistake forever. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Who's next? Further comment from the general public? Going once, twice. Jeff, I'll invite you back up to the podium.
Jerry Dunker.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
A lot of people in front of us lately.
No. First of all, I just wanted to comment and just reiterate what Nicole said about the traffic study. And this was not required before 2009. It's the new engineering standards. We did the study that was required. And there was also a study done during the Bridgewater development that was part of the same property that was 82 homes that showed a similar intersection use and would still operate at the similar levels. So that's two independent studies that follow the regulations that are asked for that show that these intersections are operating at the levels they need to even after full build out. So I mean, it sounds like it's more of an enforcement issue than an infrastructure issue. And I understand there's lots of observations and comments, and but these are all opinions, and we did the study that is based on the national standards that shows how these intersections are going to stay operating the way they are operating today. Also, there was some talk about the 2007 report, which a lot of time was put into. Most of the stuff that was mentioned was east of Monaghan Road. It was not in the city limits and still is not in the city limits. This property is west of Monaghan Road, within the city limits, and has been designated as urban residential since 1996, so over 20 years on the 1996 growth policy. But if you do look at that 2007 report and keep digging through it to page 111, there's 10 pages of affordable housing needs from 2007, when the median price was $319,000. Today, that is over $500,000, and it's increasing. Another part of this is an issue is affordable housing should be located in suitable areas throughout the community. Care must be taken to assure that affordable housing is close to employment, parks, schools, and commercial services, and it's best located within walking and cycling distance of most services. It's a big part of the reason why we chose this land. That's all I had from those reports. And as Rhonda said, I think we really need to look at more relevant stuff that's more recent. These reports are all updated for a reason. In 2007 was a lot different time than it is right now. In 2016, we had the needs assessment, which was already covered. It was 87 pages. And then in 2017, just last fall, City Council adopted the strategic housing plan, 63 pages. And it also states in here, it took over 6 months and it involved extensive community engagement. And I don't think I need to go over those because many of you were very involved in that. The last thing, if we just looked last month, this extension of services plan, April of 2018. There's a map there. Exhibit B, it's on page 46, and it shows the boundaries are going to be extended all the way to Missy Lane. And it specifically mentions this project, or this parcel, on page 12, that the development is going to happen along Monaghan Road within the next 5 years. I can tell you as one of the owners of the land that the development is going to happen. By right, by zoning, we can do Class A manufactured homes, daycare, guest domestic worker quarters, and single family dwellings. So this kind of comes down to we can have 35 more homes that are over $500,000 and keep increasing the cost, or we can finally put a dent in the need we've been talking about since before 2007. This is privately funded. I don't think that's going to happen again with the cost of land going up. Deed restrictions. So like I was saying before, these are going to be developed by the Housing Authority and the city, and they have to be approved by them before it can go through. Traditional deed restriction typically has 6 elements to it. There's income limits, asset limits, which is set up usually as 1.5 times the cost of the home, so people can't have assets over that. Primary residence, primary and only residence, these are not second homes. They're not rentals. One member of the household works within the city limits, and the resale, this is the important part of this, the resale or transfer is only to another qualified applicant, and it's set by the Housing Authority. A typical appreciation is 3% annually. So that's how these stay affordable forever. It's not 10 years, it's not the second person that buys it pays $100,000 more. That's the whole key to the deed restriction. The light deed restriction has those same limits, it just takes away the income limit. But it still has to be your primary residence, you have to work in the city. And the resale is only to another qualified buyer. Is there any questions on deed restrictions?
Any questions? Richard.
In condition 21.
Yeah.
Does that refer to light? Is there anything in condition 21 that refers to light
Yeah, so the
deed
first,
restrictions?
the second sentence, units intended to be deed restricted for local workers will first give priority and may not exceed 50% of the homes. That's the light deed restriction. That still is local worker, primary residence, and has the resale restrictions.
And the resale
It has
is
to be
not income restricted, or?
Buying it is not income restricted
Okay.
on these light deed restrictions to qualify to buy one.
Okay, how about to keep the house itself affordable?
When they go to sell it, the cost is set by the housing authority, what they can sell it for, the resale. And it's typically around 2 or 3%
Under a
annual.
light? Under the light?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, all of them have that same restriction. That's what keeps them affordable for.
All right,
yeah.
Thanks.
Katie.
Real quick question. I just kind of, my brain is in a tizzy, so could you, 50%, so 50% of the homes are for light deed restricted, but then not on top of that 50% of the units are income restricted? Meaning you could take 50% of the homes and do them all at market cost and then make sure that they're income restricted and go to, the other 50% could go to income restricted and someone who lives there, you know what I'm saying? So that 50 of them could potentially be at market value, how it reads, and then the other 50 could be doubled down on. So does it read that all of them will have some sort of deed restriction applied to them?
Yes.
Okay,
All of them.
and it's clear enough that you feel okay with it?
I'm confused. Sorry, I know. No, Katie, I'm not confused by you, but I understand what you're asking. Are the units that are, I guess, reserved for local 59917 workers, are those going to be price restricted as well as?
Yes.
They are, okay.
Yeah, the resale restricted.
Okay.
Correct.
So we might want to make that a little clearer, because I understood it to be the 50% would be just reserved for local workers, and then the other 50% would be price restricted. So we might.
Yes, that's exactly what I was clarify.
Yeah, so 100% of them will have local, a primary residence restriction, one member of the household works within the city limits, and and the resale is controlled by the housing authority.
Is it 100%?
100%, yeah. Unless, we're proposing to knock that down a little bit to help pay for the trail, potentially. But again, the goal is for 100% of them to stay that.
Thanks.
Same with the light versus traditional.
Mhm.
I mean, we want 100% of them to have all those restrictions.
Right. I always have to look for loopholes. So-
Yeah.
But thank you for clarifying, I appreciate that.
Well, and again, this, what I'm reading you is typical, and it's kind of what we got from the consultants that did the housing assessment, but this still has to be developed by the housing authority, and if there's a housing coordinator, we're not the ones developing it.
Further questions? Yes? Katie?
No.
No.
Sorry, oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. Any
Thank
further
you.
questions for Jerry? Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Give the audience one more opportunity. Any more public comment before I close the public comment period? Mark? Sure.
It's Mark Daniels, 1053 Creekview Court. And I just want to be clear, I don't think any of us that are opposed to the subdivision are oblivious to the fact that those properties will end up being developed at some point. I think the issue here is that there's no infrastructure in place to support further urban sprawl right now. And I could be wrong with some of my neighbors. Conversations we've had, but there's no sidewalks in Vorman to Park to 7th. They're just not there. There's no pedestrian. It's not pedestrian friendly right now, and there's a ton of pedestrian traffic. So I think that is probably a lot of our concern right now. Thanks.
Real briefly.
Sorry, Erin Flaherty. Flaherty, 1060 Creekwood. I also just wanted to comment that that large lot to the east of Creekwood has now been purchased, and that will be developed. This is a time where we could put in the infrastructure in that area as well, which is going to come with its own concerns as well. But when we're talking about this project, we should possibly be talking about that development as well.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. Jeff Sanders again. Just a question for the, I guess, the city professional people regarding the resale. Does the Housing Authority have the personnel and the jurisdiction to oversee the resale of these houses?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes.
And the other point was regarding extra work for the parks and maintenance. It sounded like that they came up the first half of today about maintenance and parks, and then I heard about that trail maybe being maintained by the Parks Department. They might not look too favorably on that.
Thanks. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this item, and I think we're going to go ahead and recess for about 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene here at 10 of 9. We are back in session. We just closed our public hearing on item 8A, and I'll go ahead and turn it back to council with the encouragement that to keep us on track, whether we deliberate in favor or against, that we have a motion perhaps to start with to help guide our discussion. Andy.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve WPP 18-02, WPUD 18-02, adopt the findings of fact, staff report, and the 24 attached conditions. That would be including the additional condition number 24 as recommended to us by Wendy in our current staff report. The requested zoning deviations and the subdivision variances as recommended to us by the Whitefish Planning Board on March 17, 2016.
Is there a second to the motion? Motion seconded by Councilor Hildner. Andy, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak to it briefly. This is a pretty classic example of what I have argued is the major issue with affordable housing in this community for the 19 years I've been sitting up here, is that everybody wants it, nobody wants it next door. And while I've heard a lot of not unvalid arguments from the neighborhoods about adequacy of infrastructure in that area, I also was sitting here in 2001 when your subdivision was approved, and I heard all of those same arguments from everybody that lived around what was your vacant area at that particular point in time. And those are not unvalid things, and are not concerns that we don't hear, but yet at the same time, we drive, unfortunately, infrastructure improvement a lot of times, given our very limited budgets, through development. We have to, one, generate additional tax revenues to do that, and two, we have to get those improvements from developers as we move forward with development in this community. It's interesting, I was flying over this, I was coming home from work last night, sitting on the left side of our favorite Horizon flight that arrives at 7:20 p.m. We happened to fly right over this piece of property, and I'm on the left-hand side of the plane looking out the window down at it, and I can't remember if you look at the aerial photo in your, Wendy, can you pull that up real quick? And if we actually look at Creekwood, and if we look at what's to the south, and then we look at this piece of property, and we can kind of see that it's a pretty natural place for development. It is zoned WR1. It is single-family zoning, and Dick's argument probably swayed me, and 2 weeks ago I was kind of prepared to make a motion to deny. So I'm really glad we had a couple of weeks to think about this. I had a good chance to go back and look at the record from what we'd done in 2001, look at what we'd approved there for the Bridgewater previously, and actually think about it. And Rhonda made a very good point. We really need houses in this community that people can actually live in. And yeah, we could go ahead and let this develop out, and my guess is if we denied tonight, we'll get a subdivision back here within a relatively short period of time that's going to have 35 houses in it, and they're going to be between $500,000 and $1 million. And quite frankly, we got a lot of those in this community. They're being built every day, and we got a lot of them for sale on the market, and they are the kind of thing that pretty much when every subdivision comes through, we beat the developer over the head and go, gee guys, why don't you build us something that we actually need, a product type that our market is craving and there's a huge demand for. And I do understand the issue with traffic moving through your neighborhood, and that's the basic argument here. I mean, let's face it, you guys don't want that additional traffic driving through your neighborhood, and I understand that. But we get paid the big money up here to make the decisions that hopefully are best for this community as a whole. And as I've thought about this for the last 2 weeks, and as I went back through it word by word again the other night and on Sunday, that's what we get to do on Sundays. That's our fun day, actually, sitting around reading 740 pages. As I was doing that, I had to really ask myself, what's good for this community? And I had to say that this is good for this community. And for me to vote against it would really be a travesty of everything I've purported as important in this community for housing type.
Thank you. Any further comments on the motion? Just for clarification, if this does get a favorable vote tonight, could you please work, Angie, with the developer and make sure the language in condition number 21 is what we understand it to be, and we can briefly review that on the consent agenda as part of the second reading?
Sure.
Appreciate that. Andy.
And Mr. Mayor, I would like one amendment. If I would go ahead and move that we make a slight change in the wording to condition number 15. And where that says within a 20-foot trail easement, I would insert a comma at that point, and then I would say with that section of the easement through the dedicated parkland to be determined by the Bike Pedestrian Committee, the Park Board, and the Parks Department, comma, dedicated to the city.
Is there a second to that friendly amendment to get condition number 15?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. We will vote on the amendment, which is to condition number 15 first, and then on to the original motion. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. That does carry unanimously, which brings us back to the original motion for approval as amended. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And Michelle, that carries unanimously. Thanks to everyone for coming this evening and for participating. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah,
I know, I
I
didn't
cut
know.
my hair. This looks so nice. It's the start of summer. It had to all go.
We will move on to item 8B, a request by Kevin Corbett, I should say, for a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment located at 642 Columbia Avenue. The property is zone WR2, which is our two-family residential district. Bailey.
Good evening. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment on the second floor of an addition to a single-family residence. The proposed apartment would be approximately 528 square feet. There would be an unenclosed stairway on the outside of the addition, and that would be proposed to access the apartment. The building would be set back the minimum of 10 feet from the northern side property lines, and then greater than the required 20 feet along the western rear property line. Additionally, the property owner did receive a variance to the setback requirements in February of this year for an expansion to the existing non-conforming garage, but the accessory apartment is not located in that garage. I just wanted that clear. We're not talking about our standard one that we see above the garage. So the subject property is approximately 6,500 square feet. It is currently developed with a single-family residence. It's surrounded by residential uses on all sides. It is also zoned WR2, which is our two-family residential district. And the growth policy designation for this area is urban, which does correspond to the WR2 zoning. It will be connected to all city services. We did mail a notice to adjacent landowners within 150 feet of the parcel on March 29th. We also noticed advisory agencies and placed a legal in the paper as well. And I've had no comments received on this project. So just some highlights from the criteria. The development proposal is consistent with the purpose and intent of our regulations. The apartment, there's a section in the zoning that describes the requirements for accessory apartments. This does comply with all of those requirements as well. The performance standards do require that the owner maintain this as their permanent residence or their primary residence in order to rent the accessory apartment. As I said, the proposed use is accessory to single-family house. Adequate parking can be provided on site with two in the proposed that they're going to expand the garage is what their variance was approved for, to expand a non-conforming garage. So there would be 2 parking spaces in a new 2-car garage, and then they do have room for the 1 additional parking space between the garage and the northern property line as well. Since the accessory apartment would not be located in the detached accessory building, it cannot receive the reduced setbacks. They will have to comply with all the primary structure setbacks, since this would be attached to the primary residence, not the detached accessory. And the proposed property, or the property, does comply with the minimum lot size and square footage requirements in order to have this. As I said, parking for the accessory apartment would be off the alley at the rear of the property or in the existing driveway. There is a driveway for the current garage off of East 7th there as well. Any new driveways or parking areas are required to be paved per our zoning regulations. The subject property is currently served by sewer and water, and separate water and sewer is required, or the applicant has talked with the Public Works Department, and they can connect into the existing service, but they may have to upgrade the line, and they are aware of that. So that would be something that they would figure out with the Public Works Department. Traffic impacts are anticipated to be minimal as it does have an existing single-family residence. It's located in an existing neighborhood with similar uses. The proposed accessory apartment will meet the lot coverage and height standards of 35 feet as it will be attached to the primary dwelling. So it doesn't, 24 feet is our standard for detached accessory buildings. Again, this is a unique situation since it's attached to the primary dwelling, so they do get a different height standard. It is similar to existing residential uses in the neighborhood, and it must comply, as I said, with the standard setbacks for primary dwellings. The proposed use is not expected to impact or change the character of the existing neighborhood, and the density is not out of character with this area as well. So staff recommended approval of the conditional use permit application, subject to 11 conditions. The planning board met on April 19th and considered the request. There were no members of the public other than the applicant that spoke at the meeting, and I did attach those draft minutes to your packet as well. The planning board did vote unanimously to recommend approval to the city council. And I'm happy to answer questions or go into more detail if you need me to.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey on her staff report? Not seeing any. Thanks very much. I know the applicant is here. Would he or she like to address the council? And then we'll go to our public comment.
Hi, I'm Kevin Corbett. I live at 19 O'Brien Avenue, Whitefish. This will become my primary residence after we get approval from the city, get the building permit approved. We'll live in the main house and rent out the accessory apartment for additional income is the intent. The 19 O'Brien address, which is currently zoned WB3, will probably be returned to commercial use. I have no other comments to offer unless you have questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Any questions for the applicant? Thanks. Appreciate your time. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 8B of our agenda. Any public comment on this item? Any public testimony? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion.
I would move to approve WCUP 18-06 for a conditional use permit to construct an accessory apartment located at 642 Columbia Avenue, Zone WR2.
Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Seconded by Ryan. Would you like to address your motion, Katie?
No, I would not.
All right. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously as well. Michelle. Thanks, Kevin. We'll move on to item 8C, which will be ordinance 18-16, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Whitefish, Montana, approving a request by Schumacher Interests Incorporated for a planned unit development overlay to develop 60 condominium units located at 6405 Highway 93 South, and this will be on a first reading. Wendy.
All right, good evening. So the request before you is a PUD to develop 60 condominiums in 10 buildings, sorry. And then I just point out too that this is being reviewed under the former PUD chapter. They submitted their application back in March. The new regulations just went into effect like a week or so ago. At any rate, so they are proposing to construct some residential. The buildings will have 5 to 10 units per building, which is a density of about 7.8 dwelling units per acre. No density bonus is being requested. They're generally located along the pond with a couple of buildings in the southeast corner of the project. They're providing parking at 2.33 spaces per unit for a total of 140 parking spaces. Access will be by private driveways off of the newly constructed Acres Lane, which is an east-west road that connects Highway 93 to Whitefish Avenue. This road was constructed with the project to the south, the Marriott and that other subdivision, and curb and gutter was installed, so these folks will put in sidewalk, street trees, and a boulevard. The existing driveway at the northwest corner of the subject property is going to be reserved for some future commercial development. It's not a part of this particular project. There's a southern driveway that's kind of right at the entrance of Acres Lane, and that's going to be abandoned. The healthy trees that are located on site will be retained, and then a trail will be located along the pond. The project is zone WB2, which permits all hospitality uses, including short-term rentals, and the applicant has indicated that this is a potential for owners within this development. The applicant is not requesting any zoning deviations. They're just requesting the PUD in order to develop residential. As part of benefits provided under the PUD, the applicant's proposing to give $30,000 to the city of Whitefish that will go toward a future intersection signal at Highway 93 South and Acres Lane when MDT determines that warrants are being met. Again, the property is on WB2, it's undeveloped, it's served by all public services and facilities. We noticed adjacent landowners. We did receive one letter from a neighbor that wanted to ensure the project was compatible with the neighborhood. They requested to make the path around the pond open to the public and a request not to permit short-term rentals in the neighborhood. All the zoning regulations are being met. We review these according to the criteria in the PUD chapter. The pond along the north side of the project is a storm pond for the Mountain Mall and surrounding neighborhoods, which requires a 15-foot setback, which they are maintaining with their project. There are a number of large, healthy trees that are going to be evaluated for incorporation into the landscaping. There's no other environmentally sensitive areas found on the site. There's no mapped crucial wildlife habitat or seasonal migration areas. We did contact Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to find out, just to make sure that there wasn't anything, and they did send staff out, and they didn't identify anything that needed to be protected. They are providing 59% of the site is not encumbered by buildings, parking, and drive aisles, which is how the current or the former PUD chapter read. Again, they're providing a trail along the pond, and there's landscaping around all the buildings and parking area. The path is going to be a gravel path, so folks can passively appreciate the pond. It's not intended to be an active open space area. The neighborhood is larger commercial buildings and residential at a variety of densities and product types, so this project should fit in well with that neighborhood. Again, they're proposing to retain as much natural vegetation as possible, and then they are required to obtain architectural review, so one of the items they have to maintain that visual variety so all the units don't look exactly identical. The project is considered infill. It's surrounded by urban scale development, and it's fully served by all public services and facilities. Under facilitating street connectivity and connectivity, the applicant did facilitate street connections when it participated in the development of Acres Lane. A portion of the 60-foot right-of-way was on their property, and they dedicated that so that road could be constructed. The applicant did submit a TIS. The TIS trips are a little bit denser than what was actually proposed. I think originally they were thinking about doing something a little bit denser. So the trips won't be quite as high as what they put in their report, which is daily trips of 1,900 at full build out, even though warrants still won't be met requiring the installation of a intersection signal by MDT. That's why they're proposing to pay $30,000 for the city to hold when that intersection light warrants are being met. Under providing pedestrian facilities and bike facilities, again, they're going to install frontage improvements on the north side. There is a snow bus that picks up folks at the Mountain Mall, and they're in close proximity to the bike path along the Whitefish River. The applicant is not requesting any sort of density bonuses, so they're not required to provide any affordable housing. The planning board held a public hearing on April 19th. At that hearing, the applicant agreed to allow their proposal trail along the pond to be open to the public. They stipulated to that on the record. So the planning board did recommend approval 4-1, subject to 13 conditions in the staff report. Just to hit some of the highlights of those conditions, planning board recommended a condition to abandon the driveway onto Highway 93 South that would kind of serve this area. So it'll be just a nice sidewalk along the highway. No building permits will be submitted to the building permit until all the improvements have been accepted by the Public Works Department, including the sidewalk along Acres Lane. Before issuing the first building permit, the $30,000 would be paid to the city of Whitefish to hold for that intersection signal. And then finally, I would just point out in the ordinance, draft ordinance, it's part of your packet, the fourth whereas, we put that stipulation that that trail would be open to the public. So you can certainly review that and answer any questions for you.
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report?
I also have an aerial map too if you want to get a bigger picture.
Okay. Thanks, Wendy. Not seeing any questions at this time. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be ordinance 18-16, and I would invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to present to the council. Eric.
Good evening, Council. Eric Mulcahy, Sand Surveying, 2 Village Loop, one of the consultants representing the applicant. We don't have a lot to add. Wendy covered the staff report well. We don't oppose any of the conditions that are proposed. This is a WB2 zone, so it would anticipate commercial uses. We're proposing residential, which we think acts as a good buffer between River's Edge and the park and the Marriott Hotel to the south. The applicant did have a previous approval for a residential and commercial development on this project previously, but it expired 6, 7, 8 years ago. So this has had approvals previously. Bruce Booty and Ken Huff, the architect, worked really hard on the site plan and the architecture to reduce the bulk and scale of the buildings and try to fit it into the setting with the trees and the pond on this site. And if you have any questions to those topics, they're available. And Doug Pepmeyer from TD&H is our engineer on our infrastructure, so if you have infrastructure-related questions, he can answer those.
Thanks, Eric. Any questions for Eric or the other representatives present? Richard.
How close is that retention pond to being full and no longer serving its purpose? And secondly, what is the outfall when it's at high water? And where does that water go?
Doug Petmeyer, TD&H Engineering. It's a very specific question. We have not run any storm calculations, but I can tell you you can kind of see there's an easement up to the kind of the northeast corner there. That's actually an overflow. I believe it goes down to the Whitefish River. It's a large pond, so I would be shocked if it doesn't have volume to handle this. The other aspect to consider is a portion of this is accounted for in the storm drain design for Acres Lane. So there is a certain amount that we'll try and take as much as we can to that system. That system then goes into a water quality treatment device before it goes out to the river there. So there's actually two places the water can go. And I don't think we'll have any issues there, but we will be required to meet, all the design requirements with Public Works on that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Doug.
Yep.
Public comment this evening on this item. Any public testimony? Mary.
Good evening, Mary Flowers. I'm here tonight representing Community Unity Consulting as well as the South Whitefish Neighborhood Association in my comments. And my comments are focused on the issue of short-term rentals. As you're aware, this council on February 5th of this year adopted revised regulations for short-term rentals, and at the second reading of these revised regulations on February 20th, further amended these to clarify that short-term rentals are not permitted in the WB2 zoning district. Additionally, the recent Whitefish Strategic Housing Plan identifies the necessity of limiting the creation of new short-term rentals as vital to the goal of creating more workforce housing. In fact, the Strategic Housing Plan calls for putting in place strategies to encourage the conversion of short-term rentals into long-term rentals, the existing short-term rentals. In the application before you tonight, they are requesting a PUD overlay in an area that is currently zoned WB2 to allow residential uses for 60 condominiums in a district that specifically does not allow short-term rentals. The staff report for this application, which you're being asked to adopt as finding of facts, however, states, and I quote, "The WB2 zoning district permits all hospitality uses, including short-term rentals, and the applicant has indicated this is a potential for owners within this development." When you look at the definition for condominiums, which the city code defines as ownership in common with others of a parcel of land and certain parts of buildings, together with individual ownership in fee of a particular unit or apartment building, nowhere does it imply or state that condominiums are a hospitality or entertainment use intended for short-term rentals. The Whitefish zoning code defines hospitality and entertainment, and I provide you the definition there: uses catering to traveling public or the commercial, recreational, and leisure needs of visitors, residents alike, including hotels, motels, and this is the vague, confusing language, and various types of lodging accommodations. Indoor theater, bowling alleys, enclosed skating and golfing facilities, and similar indoor facilities. While the WB2 does allow under the permitted uses for hotels and motels and other hospitality entertainment uses, the applicant is not applying for one of these uses. Rather, and I think this is important, the staff report states on the first page, zoning deviations. The PUD request does not include any zoning deviations. The only reason for the PUD is to develop residential. Without a PUD, this residential use would not even be allowed in the WP2 zoning. The Whitefish zoning code defines residential uses that do not allow for rentals or shorter than 1 month. And I provide you the definition there. So finally, your recently adopted short-term rental standards state, short-term rental, and it stated this previously too, but short-term rentals are not compatible with other residential areas as there are potential traffic and noise impacts, as well as the diminished availability of long-term rental and affordable housing units. Allowing the insertion of short-term rentals by calling them hospitality entertainment units within the zoning district, not specifically identified as allowing for short-term rentals, would open the entire WB2 corridor to a proliferation of short-term rentals, given the numerous housing projects and condominium units you have already approved and that will be coming before you in the near future. This is counting your strategic housing plan, your housing needs study, your recently adopted revised short-term rental standards. PUDs may be conditioned by this council to ensure they are providing a clear community benefit consistent with city policies such as your strategic housing plan. We urge you to make the following amendment to the resolution before you. And it would read, I move to amend WPUD 18-01, along with the finding of facts in the staff report, et cetera, to add a new condition, number 14, no short-term rentals are permitted, and to delete from the staff report the following statement. The WB2 zoning district permits all hospitality uses, including short-term rentals, and the applicant has indicated this as a potential for the owner within this development. So I think this is not a little matter. It sets a precedent for this entire corridor as we're working to develop a highway corridor plan to address impacts in this area, both transportation and land use. I think to rely on this obtruse use of hospitality as a loophole to allow short-term housing is not in the benefit of the city, and I'd strongly urge you to so condition this proposal before you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Appreciate the comments. Rhonda.
Good evening again. Rhonda Fitzgerald. I participated on the B2, B3 committee mediation committee a few years ago when a bunch of unpermitted uses had sort of crept into the B2, and we went through a very long process, and which involved lawyers and other things, in order to clean that up. And one of the discussions was over residential in the B2, which is not at this time permitted. The only residential is for a caretaker unit. And we have been batting around adding residential in the B2 with deed restriction as one approach for the affordable housing strategy. Some of us are not in favor of that because we see it as several giant loopholes, but it is not currently permitted, and that's why they're doing a PUD, is to get residential in a zone where it's not permitted. The B2 zone is a secondary business district. It is not general commercial as was stated in your packet. It's for very limited uses that require lots of parking, like car lots and lumber yards and things like that. It's not a residential zone now, and the argument to include residential in there is specifically to be deed restricted to help ameliorate the affordable housing problem. So I'm quite puzzled by this application. It doesn't seem to fit any of the, it seems in fact contrary to everything the city is undertaking currently. It is putting residential in a B2 zone where the only argument for that has been that it would be affordable and deed restricted. It's a PUD, but it has no demonstrated community benefit. Isn't that why you get a PUD, is because you have community benefit? And 3, we're currently working on inclusionary zoning, and that would mean that anything like this would need to have some portion that would be affordable. For instance, somewhere in the 20 to 25% range, but instead this is presented to us as for very wealthy people who are building very large homes that take 2 to 3 years to build, and they need somewhere to live part-time while they're undertaking that, but they also, I guess, want to do short-term rental to help it make their payment or something. The whole thing seems just bizarre to me. And it is not at all in keeping with the direction that all of our documents that have been developed recently have been giving. And I'm going to read to you an objective from the Housing Needs Assessment. It's the primary home, second home relationship, because these are clearly vacation homes. Maintain and, if possible, increase the percentage of homes occupied by residents of the community as their primary residence. The Whitefish area experienced a 10 percentage point decline in homes occupied by local residents between 2000 and 2010. It went from 80% to 70%. I think we can assume it's gone down at least another 10%. And what we're trying to do is go back to a higher percentage of homes occupied by year-round residents, which this clearly is not. And now we're undertaking a tourism master plan, and we're in the process of just hearing from the community what their concerns are, what their issues are. And early in this, we're hearing that there's a huge concern over the sheer numbers of vacation homes and short-term vacation rentals, which outweigh the numbers of year-round residents. This is concerning for local residents. It's exacerbating the perceived impact of tourism because it feels that things are badly out of balance. And this project would just contribute to that out of balance. So I would urge you, if you're going to look at allowing residential PUD with residential in the B2 zone, that it has to be affordable and deed restricted and no short-term rentals. To me, there are so many things wrong with this project, I just can't even believe it's in front of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda, for your comments. Further testimony tonight on this item? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council for discussion or a motion.
What's that ordinance number?
It would be 18-16.
16?
Well, I'll drive right down on this, Dave, to the comments that we received tonight on this. Can you address the short-term rental issue with regard to the zoning?
Yes, I can. The zoning code in both the B2 and the B3 allow hospitality uses, which talks about all various types of lodging. That's why short-term rentals are a permitted use in the downtown B3 as well as in the B2. The council did amend the preface to the short-term rental ordinance where it listed various types of zone that they were allowed in. They removed the B2, you guys did. However, that didn't make the B2 zone no longer allow short-term rentals.
We didn't amend the zoning text, correct?
Well, you amended the chapter on short-term rentals, and there's, in the preface of that it said short-term rentals are allowed in various zoning districts such as the resort residential, resort business, WB3 and WB2, but WB2 was struck out of that because we were planning as part of our zoning for affordability to make some other changes where we would look at multifamily and affordable housing with multifamily in the B2 district, as well as add some additional language in there that would eliminate the ability to do short-term rentals in residential. But that's kind of tied in with the zoning for affordability stuff, so it's kind of, right now it's a little bit on hold, but we're going to be bringing that forward. But currently, as the zoning administrator, short-term rentals are a permitted use. However, residential isn't, so it's not like there's going to be a proliferation of short-term rentals because the only way to do residential in the B2 is to do a planned unit development. So you guys, the council has the ultimate discretion. If you wish to place conditions on that doesn't allow that, you certainly have the opportunity to.
And from your perspective for this PUD, what is the significant public benefit that will be
Well, they're
realized?
providing $30,000 towards that stoplight. That's their public benefit that was proposed.
And the trail?
And a trail that's open to the public and, open space. But they're also not asking for any deviations from the zoning. The only
Understood.
thing they're asking for is that use of
The
residential.
Richard.
I'm going to take a run at this. I'm going to guess, well, we'll see where it goes. I'm going to move to deny ordinance 18-16, an ordinance the City Council of the City of Whitefish, Montana to approve a request by Schumacher Interests Incorporated for a PUD overlay to develop 60 condominium units located at 6405 Highway 93 South on the first reading.
Is there a second to the motion?
I will second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Richard, would you like to address your motion?
Yeah, at least until, yeah, sure. I think what it does is essentially we're creating additional hotel units. I think it's contrary to our objectives of a 70-30 split in terms of ratio of home ownership and second homes. And the idea that it would be open to short-term rentals, I think is anathema to what we're trying to accomplish.
Katie.
I would like to counter you with, we also have the ability to deed restrict for short-term rentals within this PUD, and we can't make the assumption that they are hotel units at this point in time within this application.
Angie, are there adequate findings, or would we need to craft findings to support Richard's motion?
I would craft findings to support Richard's motion. I guess as far as, I guess I could also mention, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, they can put a motel or hotel here by a matter of right. So, I mean, if you're talking short-term rentals versus another motel, they're not going to have to go through approval. Am I right, Dave?
And legally, this type of use is allowed currently in our zoning code for the WB2.
At the time that they submitted their
Which was
application,
submitted
they
in
were
January.
grandfathered, yes. So, I mean, that's, I guess, one thing I would like to mention is if you were to deny on the basis that you don't want to see a hotel-like use of this land, they can do that as a matter of right.
Thanks. Frank?
Angie, are we allowed to add a requirement if we wanted to move to approve this that would restrict or remove their right to use it as short-term rentals?
Well, it's a PUD, you have a lot of flexibility. But again, I just caution you that, hotel, motel uses are allowed as a matter of right.
Great, thank you.
Andy?
I'm a little ambivalent about this for a lot of reasons, but I'm afraid I'm gonna have to probably vote against Richard's motion, and the reason being is I can see Tim Grattan, the ghost of Tim Grattan, even though he's still alive, standing out there saying that you're moving the goalposts while the ball's in the air. And given the fact that they designed a project and they put forth and made their PUD application when our rule was in fact different, I think now, as that has been moving through the process, to now suddenly say, gee guys, you can't really do that, is, I find myself on pretty shaky moral and legal ground both. And that said, I'm not a big proponent of the project by any means, any way, shape, or form. I think both Mary and Rhonda's comments are right on the money, but at the end of the day, it's our job to provide a fair court up here and a fair playing field for people to work in, and I fear that were we to deny this, we're not doing that.
Thanks, Andy. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion fails on a 5-1 vote. Which brings us back to a new motion. Andy?
I would move to approve WPUD 18-01 along with the findings of fact and the staff report and 13 conditions of approval as recommended to us by the Whitefish Planning Board at their April 19, 2018 meeting, and I believe that would be on our first reading.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I'll
Andy?
speak to it really quickly. I'm not a fan of the project. Like I said, I'm pretty ambivalent about it, but at the end of the day, I really do feel that we owe people a fair shake, and that's the fair shake, I think.
Katie?
I agree with Andy, but we're kind of between a rock and a hard place, and we need to follow the law and follow our code as written, and this is how I see it, is that we have the means and the terms to approve this project.
All those in favor of the motion? Richard, excuse me?
Yeah, I want, the reason for my initial motion was that I wanted us to be clear as to the action we were taking. I think Andy's correct that Tim Grattan moving the goalpost is probably not a bad analogy, and I'm not really ambivalent about it. I just don't think it's right for us, but I think it probably is, unfortunately, the correct thing to do.
Thank you, Richard. Further discussion on the motion?
I would just add that, given that, you could put up a hotel as a use by right, at least with a residential project, there's opportunity for people to make a home there, and so I think that also something to consider.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well. Michelle, thanks, guys. And we'll move on to item 9, which was postponed from our last meeting so that we could have Dana back for her third quarter financial report for FY 2018.
Yes, thank you. It's great to be back. So obviously, we got the budget out to you last meeting, as we have a meeting coming up on the 29th. So an agenda will be coming out, just kind of an update on the budget side later this week. But just to talk about the third quarter of fiscal year 18, I did have pointed out to me an error, and I'm going to say that it was a budgeting brain. I was in the thick of the budget while also doing this before I left for a conference. So on the first page where we have the cash balances, comparison, it's March 31st, 2016, 17, and 18, with 17 and 18 being compared in the one-year change. But mostly good news in the third quarter report. We have cash balances increasing once again. Again, our general fund is seeing a significant increase of about 29% compared to last year. We are seeing increased revenue not only from the property tax increases, but municipal court fines are up significantly, as our planning fees and our a return on our investments. We're up to about 1.8% with STIP, and we just recently invested with a company, Morton Asset Management out of Utah, and they're helping us get a better return on our cash that we just have sitting around. So I think it's a good sign. You know, we're gonna increase the interest that we're earning from, I'd have to look and see the totals, but, you know, significantly. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars versus just like $80,000. So I think it's a good thing for us to look at. Obviously, we have very secure investments based on our investment policy we updated recently. But to get back to what we've done over the third quarter, Parks and Recreation, again, we're seeing great increases in that fund. Some of that has to do with just increased transfers from the general fund and increases in assessments, but they have been providing more services as a result of that increase. Law enforcement also up. We had a higher increase in cash balance and higher transfers. One of the things that we do have outstanding as of the date of this report was the SRO payment for partial year from the school district, and that has since been received, so we're only 3 months that we have outstanding, which will finish out this year. So that's good news. Library, we are continuing to see a decrease, but it's a planned decrease, so I'm not concerned at this time. They have deferred maintenance that they've been working on, and we did allow for a spend down of cash balance in their fund for the FY18 budget, as well as the FY19 budget, actually. Fire and ambulance fund also looks a little bit shocking at first with it being down. However, we had the firefighters go out to California. Those were unexpected costs, and so they were not budgeted, but we did receive the $115,000 payment from the state of California in April, later in April, or maybe it was in May. Getting my months confused. Building permits and licenses are up 35% from the prior year, so that's really great, but tracking along with the budget for the most part. Impact fees, though, they are also up. Again, they all kind of follow the same trend. Those are exceeding budgets, the anticipated budget at this point in the year. We also are seeing planning fees up. There was 2 significant final plats that occurred. So we went from about $50,000, it resulted in $50,000 of the $111,000. So this is a very significant portion of the collections. We're still seeing increases in resort tax. We're up around 88% of the FY18 budget, and municipal court fines are also trending higher at 28% higher than last year. So all the funds are looking good. The one that I have 2 concerns. One is the fire and ambulance fund, simply because of that $115,000 we ended up spending going to California. We might have to do a budget amendment. We have the revenue that offsets it, so it's just a wash, and it'll be an adjustment. And then same with Whitefish Trail, which I informed you of last time. So really not much too exciting to report on. We're just continuing to see a return on our investments increase. Building is doing great as our resort tax. So now that you've had the budget given to you, I think that we've been able to address the capital needs of the departments. We're continuing to increase cash reserves for FY19 and being able to provide the expected levels of services for both our visitors and citizens of Whitefish. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Dana. Great report. Any questions for Dana on her quarterly report? Ryan?
Dana, do we know if the municipal court fines are rising due to an increase in crime?
You know, what we've seen in the past is that there's an increase in calls and an increase in tickets. And then we're also seeing, you know, just differences in judges. But we've seen this trend, and I'll let Chief Dial speak to the increase in. He's not here, so I'm just gonna, from the fire standpoint, I'm sure we have increased calls, but likely it's increased calls. But when we brought prosecution back in-house, we also saw a really good return on that position being brought in-house. And so I would say Mary Berry's also doing an amazing job, just as well as Christy did. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Dana? Thanks, Dana. Look forward to the budget meetings the next couple weeks. You have Adam's report enclosed with your packet. Any questions for Adam or anything else to report on, Adam?
Nope, nothing at this time.
Okay,
well,
thanks.
Actually, there's one thing. Because I heard it when brought up the SRO agreement. We did get into reach agreement with the school district for SRO for the next 2 years. And in that, I believe I notified you that it's going to be along the lines of what we had discussed before, that this first year is going to be half the difference between a base and the actual, and then the second year will be 50% of the actual costs of the officer being put over there.
Great, thanks, Adam. We'll move on to communications from you folks. Richard, anything to end with tonight on?
Sure. I want to start with a shout out to Mariah Gladstone, our Energy Corps employee. In the April 30th High Country News, I'll let you focus in on that, Jake, wherever you are. Jake. There, Jake. Anyway, Mariah was the featured person there discussing in this article her Indigikitchen blog and videos that she's producing to work on food sourcing and food cooking for indigenous peoples across the United States. The other thing is that I would encourage us to begin to think about the 93 South budget increase as requested by that committee, and whether or not we have funds or we may be able to find some funds to help. And I think that they're right that they're going to need some financial help.
Dave?
There's more in that than the $10,000 was what we have in our planning budget for this year, but there's TIF funds allocated more than that. So there's actually another $15,000 in this budget. And additionally for next year, there's about $35,000 budgeted right now. I mean, the draft budget, part of that's TIF money. So there is some additional money for consultants, and we have a contract with Bob Abilene, traffic engineer that we're going to be working with. There's an economic consulting firm that we're talking to about some potential consulting as well. So,
okay, Adam.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to make sure that got pointed out was this is the very reason we hired Hillary. So we did the analysis on whether or not we wanted to spend hundreds of thousands on consultants versus hiring a long-term planner, and we elected to hire a long-term planner to take us through this process. So we have all of the staff in place that we need to carry this through. Now, we did also recognize that there might be a couple of things along the way that we wanted a little consulting help, and that's what some of this extra money is for. So if we wanted to do, a little more of an in-depth thing on a particular portion, we certainly could. But we have all the pieces in place to carry this through and do a bang-up job. I believe we're going to end up with a great plan when all is said and done.
Well, that's great information to have. I think maybe at our next 93 South meeting, we should kick it off with that reminder, to the group, just so we're all on the same page as we move forward. Anything further, Richard?
Nope.
Thanks. Andy?
Thank you, Adam. That's exactly was my comment going to be. Because they're comparing us to Wisconsin, and we hired a consultant to do that project. And that
Correct.
was, as we remember, that's why we went through the budgeting process and hired Hillary last year. That was the whole point. So we hopefully get a better product on more things. But that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Yeah, and that'll be a good discussion when we get back to the next meeting too, because, they didn't vote to bring it forward. That was just a member that came in. So the committee itself is not asking for more money, but we'll get down into how we got to where we are at the next meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Andy. Ryan?
Nope.
Katie?
I just would like to say I'm looking forward to our council retreat. I think in the past couple meetings, we've had a lot of things come forward for us to talk about and to kind of evaluate our priority lists and lists of things to do. And I also want to say, city staff, you guys are great. Thanks for everything you guys do all the time. And you're all really hard workers, and it shows with how great this city is. So thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Frank?
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Melissa?
I'll just second what Katie said.
Thanks, Melissa. Couple things. Adam, I meant to ask you this a couple weeks ago. How did our one-year warranty review walkthrough go with Martel on this structure as well as the parking garage?
It went really well. The architects came out and met with us and the contractor, and we had a pretty good list of things we wanted them to address. There's a couple of items that were really never right from the beginning, I think maybe 3 or 4, that they've allowed to extend beyond the warranty period because they were just never correct to begin with. But my understanding from Dave Butts on that list is they've got about everything taken care of, and the things that aren't, they're on top of it. So I think things went pretty well.
Great.
Yeah.
Richard, follow up?
Just follow up on the artwork for the building. Sorry, Jake. For the artwork on the front of the building, they're still sculpting on part of it, but they hope to get off to the foundry before too long. They feel like they're on track with the project, and they're excited about it.
Great.
And one other question. We have a municipal summit all day, the 23rd? What?
So the League of Wisconsin Municipalities does tours around the state doing these summits, and they wanted to do one in our new facility, and they wanted to have good attendance, so I made sure and sent it out at least to all the area managers and city council, and I think we have well over 30 attendants that are coming to it, so I think they're very pleased with it. Should be good.
I signed up, so what time?
I think it starts at 8:30, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock,
yes.
right here in council chambers?
On the 23rd?
On the 23rd, yeah.
And it's all day?
Yes. 9 to 4. Yeah, 9 to 4.
I'll be here.
Thanks for covering. Speaking of meetings and more meetings, just a reminder, we have our May 29th and June 11 budget meetings here at City Hall. I will likely be calling in for the meeting next Tuesday because I'm traveling for work. Regarding our retreat, if you guys have agenda items, topics that you'd like me to include on my draft agenda before I send it out to you folks for review, please shoot those over to me. I sent you kind of what we had from 2016 in your email last week. It's a pretty exhaustive list, so hopefully it covers everything, but I'm sure I missed a few things. So shoot those over to me before I distribute to you a draft agenda for our retreat. Dave, I had a question. So I was assigned to the 93 South Corridor study meeting or committee, and I missed the first meeting. Could I get a copy of the minutes?
Yep, we just got the draft minutes done, and so I'll send you a copy tomorrow.
Okay. Then secondly, I was communicating with Hillary today on the phone. She asked me of my availability next week. I indicated Friday would be the only day I'm available. Then she said, actually, we're considering the next week, and I said I would be available Monday or Friday, since we have a council meeting on the 4th, and I'll be back in time for a meeting on Friday. And she said for some reason you guys can't meet as staff Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, like kind of period.
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. I mean, we're trying to juggle it with, all the committee members.
Okay.
We had talked to them about the days that they could meet, and it was Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday were the days that they settled on, either 3 to 5 or over lunch.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where you're trying to get, 9 people, the most of them that you can get there, and making sure that, like, the chairman can be there, and obviously we want you there if we can.
Yeah, and I'm not implying to schedule it around my schedule. I should be more available after the week of the 4th. So week of the 11th and beyond look a lot better for me. So.
Yeah, I mean, and we can try to delay that longer. They just wanted to, because we're trying to set up our kickoff meeting with the public sometime in June, and so wanted to meet 2 weeks from the last meeting.
Okay.
Of course, we need time to be able to put an agenda together and make sure that, you guys can cover all the stuff we need to do. So we can't do 1 week apart just because we have other stuff going on, but.
Sure. Well, I apologize. I'll miss the next meeting, but I'll play catch up for the 3rd meeting.
So we are on for the 29th still then?
What's that?
We are on still for the 29th?
No. This is the 93 South.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's all I had. Anything further from staff? Clear direction? Anything we need to add to our comments this evening to help you? How about the council? We're adjourned. Thanks.